You know what they say about humans? They're predictable, right up until they're not. And let me tell you, friend, today was one of those definitely not kind of days. The name's Karathval, and I've been watching these pink-skinned, two-legged oddities for the better part of 3 decades. Senior diplomatic observer for the Hegemony Council, if you must know. Seen every species in this galaxy throw their little tantrums, make their demands, pound their appendages on tables. Standard procedure, really. Everyone does it. Everyone except the humans, apparently. Today started like any other peace negotiation. The Grand Assembly Hall buzzed with the usual suspects. The Krillian Empire with their metallic exoskeletons gleaming under the artificial suns, the Nexary Collective floating in their environmental suits, and about 47 other species all try to look more important than they actually were. Oh, and humans. Always the humans, sitting quietly in their simple gray uniforms like they were attending a funeral instead of the most important diplomatic summit in galactic history. Ambassador Thorn sat at the human delegation table, his weathered face betraying nothing. Beside him, Captain Riley Martinez shuffled through data tablets with the kind of casual efficiency that made my mandibles twitch. These weren't the fire-breathing warriors we'd heard stories about. These looked like accountants. Boring, unremarkable accountants. The Krillian High Chancellor, Zekmor, rose from his crystalline throne, all 6 of his eyes focused on the assembly. His voice boomed through the translation matrix, carrying that particular brand of arrogance that comes with ruling 17-star systems. Fellow beings of the galaxy, Zekmor announced, his metallic voice echoing off the chamber walls. We gather today to address the human problem once and for all. Problem. That's what they called it. Like humans were some kind of mathematical equation that needed solving instead of a species that had somehow managed to carve out their own little corner of space in less than 2 centuries. The Nexary representative, a gelatinous mass of tentacles named Silquan, pulsed with agreement. The human expansion must be contained. Their aggressive territorial claims threaten the established order. Aggressive territorial claims. I almost laughed. The humans had colonized maybe 30 worlds, most of them rocks nobody else wanted. Meanwhile, the Krillian Empire sprawled across 300 systems, and the Nexary Collective had absorbed entire species without so much as a formal apology. But here's where it gets interesting. Ambassador Thorn didn't stand up, didn't pound the table, didn't even raise his voice. He just sat there, fingers steepled, watching the proceedings like he was observing a nature documentary about particularly stupid animals. The human military poses an unacceptable threat, continued Commander Vashtek of the Outer Rim Coalition, his scaled hide rippling with indignation. Their ships are primitive, their technology inferior. Yet somehow, they continue to win battles they should lose. Now that caught everyone's attention. Because it was true, wasn't it? Humans had this annoying habit of winning fights they had no business winning. Take the Battle of Kepler Station, where a single human frigate had somehow disabled 3 Krillian dreadnoughts. Or the Siege of New Mumbai, where 200 human marines had held off an army of 12,000 Nexary assault troops for 6 weeks. The official reports called it luck. Tactical innovation. Favorable circumstances. The rest of us called it deeply, profoundly unsettling. Captain Martinez leaned over and whispered something to Ambassador Thorn. The old human nodded once, then returned his attention to the assembly. Still hadn't said a word. High Chancellor Zekmor's voice grew more theatrical. We propose immediate restrictions on human expansion, mandatory technology sharing, and the establishment of monitoring stations in all human-controlled systems. The chamber erupted in approving clicks, chirps, and whatever noise the gaseous confederation made when they were happy. 47 species, all nodding in agreement. All except one. Ambassador Thorn finally stood up. The entire assembly fell silent. Not because he'd done anything dramatic, mind you. He'd simply risen from his chair with the kind of quiet dignity that somehow commanded attention. The man was maybe 60 years old, gray at the temples, with eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it. Are you quite finished? Thorn asked, his voice carrying easily across the vast chamber without amplification. Zekmore's metallic features twisted into what might have been confusion. Ambassador Thorn, surely you wish to respond to these reasonable proposals. Reasonable, Thorn repeated, and for the first time, something flickered behind those calm eyes. You want to turn my people into a client species. Strip away our sovereignty. Install your observers on our worlds. And you call this reasonable? The galaxy requires order. Silquan interjected, tentacles writhing with agitation. Human unpredictability disrupts established protocols. That's when Thorn smiled. Not a happy smile, mind you. The kind of smile a predator might, where just before it pounced. Unpredictability, he said, rolling the word around like he was tasting wine. Is that what you call it when we refuse to roll over and die on schedule? The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop a few degrees. Ambassador, Zekmore said, trying to regain control. Surely we can reach some accommodation. The Hegemony Council is prepared to offer humanity junior partnership status within the galactic community. Junior partnership. I'd seen what happened to junior partners in the Hegemony. The Vegan Trade Union had been junior partners once. Now their homeworld was a strip mining operation, and their people worked in Krillian factories for subsistence wages. Captain Martinez was watching her ambassador with the kind of attention a soldier reserves for incoming artillery. Her hand rested casually near her sidearm, and I noticed she wasn't the only human making that particular gesture. Let me see if I understand, Thorn said, his voice still perfectly calm. You want us to accept restrictions on our expansion, hand over our military technology, allow foreign observers on our sovereign worlds, and in exchange, you'll permit us to exist as your junior partners. Precisely, Zekmore confirmed, apparently missing the subtle shift in Thorn's tone. The human ambassador nodded slowly, as if considering the proposal. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small datapad. Every security sensor in the chamber locked onto him, but he just tapped the screen a few times and set on the table. Counterproposal, Thorn announced. The assembly leaned forward as one. Even I found myself straining to hear what the humans might offer in negotiation. No, that was it. One word. 2 letters. The shortest diplomatic response in galactic history. The silence that followed was the kind you hear in the vacuum of space. Complete. Absolute. Deafening. High Chancellor Zekmore recovered first. I'm sorry, did you say no? I did indeed. Thorn picked up his datapad and returned it to his jacket. The United Terran Federation respectfully declines your generous offer to subjugate us. This is not a negotiation, snarled Commander Vashtek. This is the collective will of 47 species. 47 species who have apparently confused humans with someone who gives a damn about their collective will. Captain Martinez interjected, speaking for the first time that, the looks that got. If expressions could kill, Martinez would have been vaporized on the spot. But she just sat there, arms crossed, wearing the kind of smile that suggested she'd rather be somewhere else. Preferably somewhere with more shooting and fewer speeches. Silquan's tentacles turn an alarming shade of purple. You cannot simply refuse. The galactic community demands compliance. The galactic community, Thorn said, emphasizing each word, can kiss my graying human ass. And that, friends, was when everything went sideways. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives shouting in 17 different languages, security forces moving to strategic positions. And through it all, the humans sat there like they were watching a particularly entertaining stage play. High Chancellor Zekmore activated his personal shields and rose to his full height. You dare insult this assembly? You dare defy the combined might of the hegemony? Insult? Thorn looked genuinely puzzled. Chancellor, I haven't even started insulting you yet. When I insult you, trust me, you'll know it. Captain Martinez stood up, her movement fluid and controlled. Every other human in the chamber did the same, a synchronized motion that sent alarm through the assembly like ripples in a pond. Ambassador, Martinez said quietly, perhaps we should leave these beings to their discussion. I believe they have some very important decisions to make. Indeed they do, Thorn agreed. He straightened his jacket and looked around the chamber one final time. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted other life forms. Been educational. And then he turned around and walked toward the exit, just like that. No grand speeches, no threats, no dramatic gestures. He simply turned his back on the most powerful assembly in the galaxy and walked away. The human delegation followed him, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Captain Martinez paused at the doorway and looked back at the assembly. "Oh, and Chancellor," she called out, "that thing about human unpredictability? You ain't seen nothing yet." The massive doors sealed shut behind them with a finality that seemed to echo through my very bones. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. We all just sat there, staring at the closed doors like they might reveal some cosmic truth about what had just happened. High Chancellor Zekmore was the first to break the silence. "Preposterous. They cannot simply leave. Security detained the human delegation." But when the security forces reached the docking bay, they found nothing but empty space where the human ships had been. Somehow, in the span of a 10-minute walk, the entire delegation had evacuated the station and vanished into hyperspace. Commander Vashtek's scales rippled with nervous energy. How was that possible? Our sensors detected no launch preparations. That was the question, wasn't it? How do you evacuate 47 beings from a heavily monitored diplomatic station without anyone noticing? How do you disappear 3 starships from a docking bay under constant surveillance? The answer, as we would learn in the coming days, was simple. You don't do it during the meeting. You do it 3 hours before the meeting even starts, while everyone's focused on protocol and procedure and the proper arrangement of ceremonial crystals. The ships we'd seen in the docking bay. Holographic projections. Very good ones, admittedly, but projections nonetheless. The real human delegation had been gone since before the session began, leaving behind only a skeleton crew of volunteers to attend the actual negotiations. And those volunteers? They'd walked out through the main corridors, past dozens of security checkpoints, while the real evacuation happened through maintenance tunnels that hadn't been used in decades. That IT was elegant. It was audacious. It was typically infuriatingly human. But here's the part that really got to me. They'd left behind a message, not a formal diplomatic note, not a declaration of war, just a simple text file loaded onto the station's main communication array, timed to broadcast across the entire galaxy exactly 1 hour after their departure. I was in my quarters, trying to process what I'd witnessed, when every screen on the station lit up with the same image. Ambassador Thorne, sitting in what looked like a ship's ready room, his hands folded calmly on the desk before him. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, his voice carrying the same quiet authority it had held in the assembly chamber. "By now you've heard that the human delegation walked out of the peace talks. Some of you are probably wondering why." He paused, looking directly into the camera with those weathered eyes. "The answer is simple. We walked out because there was nothing to talk about. 47 species gathered together to discuss how best to cage humanity, and they somehow expected us to participate in planning our own imprisonment." Another pause, longer this time. Let me be clear about something. Humanity didn't come to these talks seeking conflict. We came hoping for genuine dialogue, real negotiation, actual peace. What we found instead was a tribunal masquerading as a diplomatic summit. His expression hardened slightly. "You want to know about human unpredictability? Here's something predictable. We will not be caged. We will not be controlled. We will not accept restrictions on our growth, our technology, or our sovereignty. And we sure as hell won't smile and say thank you while you strip away our freedom." The camera pulled back slightly, revealing Captain Martinez standing behind Thorne's chair, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. "Some of you are probably thinking this sounds like a declaration of war," Thorne continued. "It's not. It's a declaration of independence. We're not seeking to conquer anyone. We're not planning to impose our will on other species. We just want to be left alone to make our own choices and our own mistakes." He leaned forward slightly. "But understand this. If you come for us, if you try to force compliance through violence or economic pressure or any other means, you will discover exactly how unpredictable humans can be." The transmission cut off, leaving every screen in the galaxy displaying the same message. End of communication. That was 6 hours ago. Since then, every major government in the galaxy has been trying to contact Earth, demanding explanations, threatening consequences, offering last-chance negotiations. Radio silence. Complete and total. The humans had done something that no species in galactic history had ever managed. They'd told the entire Hegemony Council to go to hell and then vanished without a trace. And you know what the really unsettling part is? Nobody knows where they went 0.3 weeks. That's how long it took for the galaxy to realize it had made the biggest mistake in its collective history. My name is Jax Kellerman, and I used to be dead. Well, not literally dead, but close enough. Prisoner of war. Cell Block 7 on the Krillian penal colony of Thaxos Prime. Been rotting in this nightmare for 2 years, ever since my transport got shot down during what the politicians called the border skirmishes. Funny how politicians always give pretty names to ugly things. The guards called it rehabilitation. We called it hell with better lighting and worse food. You want to know what 2 years in a Krillian prison does to a man? It strips away everything except the core of who you are. Some guys break. Some guys go crazy. Me? I got angry. The kind of cold, patient anger that burns slow and lasts forever. But today, everything changed. Today, humanity reminded the galaxy why evolution gave us forward-facing eyes, opposable thumbs, and an unhealthy obsession with impossible odds. Today, the galaxy learned what happens when you cage an apex predator. I was in the exercise yard when the sky caught fire. The Krillian guard had been unusually twitchy all morning. Something about increased security alerts, emergency protocols, the usual authoritarian paranoia. But when the horizon started glowing with the distinctive blue-white flare of hyperspace exits, even the most stone-faced guard stopped what he was doing and stared. .16 shapes materialized against the amber sky of Thaxos Prime. Not the sleek, organic curves of Krillian warships or the geometric precision of Nexari vessels. These were human ships, angular and aggressive, looking like they'd been designed by someone who considered subtle a 4-letter word. The prison's defense grid came online with the kind of electronic shriek that makes your teeth itch. Dozens of orbital platforms, each one capable of turning a city into glass, all swiveling to track the new arrivals. The energy buildup alone was enough to overload half the sensors on the planet. I pressed myself against the exercise yard's reinforced fence, watching what had to be the shortest rescue attempt in military history. 16 ships against the most heavily defended prison world in Krillian space. Either humanity had developed a death wish, or they knew something the rest of US didn't. That's when Commander Lisa Park's voice echoed across every communication channel on the planet, carrying the kind of casual confidence that makes smart people very, very nervous. Attention, Krillian forces. This is Commander Park of the Terran Liberation Fleet. You are currently holding 437 human prisoners of war in direct violation of 17 different galactic conventions, 12 interstellar treaties, and at least 1 law of physics. You have exactly 10 minutes to release them. The warden, a particularly unpleasant specimen named Dexthul, who collected prisoner screams like some beings collected stamps, actually started laughing. His metallic voice crackled through the prison's speaker system as he activated the planet-wide communication array. Commander Park, your tactical assessment appears to be fundamentally flawed. You are outnumbered 50-1, outgunned by a factor of hundreds, and completely surrounded by enough firepower to crack a moon. Surrender immediately, or we will add your crews to our prison population. I have several cells that would suit humans quite nicely. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. Outnumbered, Park's voice carried a note of genuine amusement that made my spine tingle in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Warden, you seem to be operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about how humans do mathematics. That's when the first orbital platform exploded that I'd seen military action before. Hell, I'd been in enough firefights to know the difference between a lucky shot and surgical precision. This wasn't luck. This was artistry painted in fire and vacuum. The human ships moved like they were dancing to music only they could hear, slipping between defensive fire patterns that should have been physically impossible to avoid. Their weapons weren't the biggest or the flashiest in the galaxy, but they hit exactly where they needed to, exactly when they needed to, with the kind of accuracy that suggested intimate familiarity with Krillian defensive systems. Platform after platform erupted into brilliant flowers of destruction, their debris creating a deadly rain that hammered the planet's upper atmosphere. Within 3 minutes, half the orbital grid was floating scrap. But here's what really got everyone's attention, human and alien alike. The attacking ships weren't just destroying the platforms. They were capturing them. Boarding pods launched from the human vessels like angry wasps. And within moments, Krillian defense installations were turning their own guns on each other. "How?" whispered Torres, a Marine from my old unit who'd been sharing my cell block. "Those platforms are automated. No boarding parties, no manual overrides. How are they taking control?" I watched another platform flip allegiance, its massive plasma cannons swiveling to target its former allies, and felt something I hadn't experienced in 2 years. Hope mixed with pure, unadulterated terror at what my own species was apparently capable of. Warden Dexthel's confident laughter had turned into the kind of panic screams that suggested someone was having a very bad day. "This is impossible. Our security protocols are absolutely unbreachable. Our systems are hardened against every known form of electronic warfare." "Your security protocols," Commander Park replied, her voice now carrying the patient tone of a teacher explaining basic mathematics to a particularly slow student, "were designed by beings who think in straight lines and plan for predictable enemies. Humans think in spirals, fight in dimensions you don't have names for, and plan for the impossible. Now, Warden, you have 5 minutes remaining." The prison's internal automated defenses tried to activate, blast doors slamming shut and weapon turrets emerging from hidden alcoves. But somehow, impossibly, the humans had already infiltrated every system on the planet. Doors that should have locked down swung open with cheerful electronic chimes. Weapons that should have fired remained stubbornly silent. Even the life support systems seemed to be following human commands rather than Krillian protocols. That's when I saw him. Marcus Chun, the ghost of Omega Station, walking through the prison's main corridor like he owned the place. Chun had been officially dead for 6 months, killed during a Nexury raid on the outer colonies. Except here he was walking through the prison's main corridor like he owned the place, wearing full tactical gear and carrying enough firepower to level a city block. The Krillian guards opened fire immediately. Chun didn't even slow down. The shots passed right through him like he was made of smoke and starlight. "Hologram?" one of the prisoners whispered. "No," I replied, watching Chun phase through a solid steel door. "Something else entirely." That's when the real show started. Chun reached the central control room, where Warden Dexthel was frantically trying to contact his superiors. The Krillian spun around as Chun materialized behind him, solid once again. "Impossible," Dexthel snarled, raising his plasma rifle. "You're dead. I saw the reports myself." "Reports of my death," Chun said with a grin that would have made sharks nervous, "were greatly exaggerated." He moved faster than physics should have allowed, disarming the warden and securing the control room in less than 3 seconds. The cell doors throughout the facility unlocked simultaneously. But that wasn't the impressive part. The impressive part was what happened next. All human prisoners, Chen's voice echoed through the facility, report to designated extraction points. "We're going home." As we made our way through the corridors, I couldn't help but notice something odd. The Krillian guards weren't fighting. They were just standing there, looking confused and disoriented. "What did you do to them?" I asked Chun as we reached the main entrance. "Neural disruptor field," he replied casually. "Temporary paralysis of aggressive impulses. They'll be fine in about an hour, but by then we'll be long gone." "Neural disruptor field?" "That's theoretical technology. It doesn't exist." Chen's grin widened. 3 weeks ago, maybe. Funny how much progress you can make when the entire galaxy declares war on you. Outside, the sky was still burning with the light of destroyed orbital platforms. But the human ships remained untouched, hanging in space like predators surveying their prey. Commander Park's voice crackled over our emergency communicators. "All prisoners accounted for. Extraction complete. Time to go home, people." "What about the Krillian fleet?" someone asked. "They'll send reinforcements." "Already taken care of," Park replied. "Admiral Foster sends his regards." That's when we learned about Phase 2. While Commander Park had been liberating Thaxos Prime, Admiral Rebecca Foster had been paying a visit to the Krillian home system. Not to attack, mind you, just to deliver a message. Foster had positioned her entire fleet in orbit around Krillos Major, the heavily fortified capital world of the Krillian Empire. 50,000 warships, millions of defense platforms, the most protected planet in the galaxy. And then she'd done absolutely nothing. For 12 hours, the human fleet just sat there, ignoring all communications, refusing all challenges, completely motionless in the face of overwhelming firepower. The Krillians had no idea what to make of it. Was it an attack? A negotiation tactic? Some kind of psychological warfare? The answer, as it turned out, was simpler and far more terrifying. Foster was proving a point at exactly noon, Krillos time. Every human ship in the system vanished simultaneously. Not in a hyperspace. Not through any known form of faster-than-light travel. They simply ceased to exist in that location and reappeared somewhere else. Specifically, they reappeared in the middle of the Krillian fleet formation. For 30 seconds, that probably felt like 30 centuries to every Krillian in the system. Human battleships occupied the exact same three-dimensional space as Krillian dreadnoughts. Physics screamed in protest. Reality developed what could only be described as a severe migraine, and every sensor in the star system registered readings that violated so many natural laws they might as well have been written in crayon by a drunk mathematician. Matter occupying the same space as other matter. Ships existing in quantum superposition with other ships. Energy fields overlapping in ways that should have resulted in the spontaneous creation of several new types of black hole. And through it all, the human vessels remained completely undamaged while the Krillian ships developed what their damage control teams would later describe as existential structural issues. Then the humans vanished again, reappearing in their original positions, as if the last 30 seconds had been nothing more than a particularly vivid hallucination. And no shots fired. No weapons discharged. No lives lost. But the message was unmistakably clear. If we could put our ships inside yours without damaging ours, what do you think we could do to your planets if we really wanted to ruin your day? High Chancellor Zekmore tried to maintain his composure when he addressed the emergency session of the Hegemony Council, but even through the recorded transmission, I could hear something I'd never heard from a Krillian leader before. Genuine, soul-deep terror. The humans, he announced to the assembled representatives, his metallic voice carrying undertones of barely controlled panic, have developed technology that appears to violate fundamental laws of physics. They can phase shift through solid matter, manipulate neural impulses at a distance, teleport entire fleets across interstellar distances without detectable energy signatures, and apparently exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Commander Vashtek's scaled hide rippled with the kind of barely controlled fear that comes from realizing your entire worldview has just been drop-kicked into irrelevance. How do we fight an enemy that can walk through walls, appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning, and apparently treat the laws of physics as polite suggestions rather than absolute requirements? The answer, as Ambassador Silquan reluctantly admitted while his tentacles writhed with what I could only interpret as existential dread, was both simple and absolutely terrifying. You don't. Perhaps, the Nexary representative suggested in the kind of tone usually reserved for discussing one's own funeral arrangements, we should reconsider our entire approach to the human situation. It's possible we may have miscalculated. Miscalculated. That had to be the understatement of the millennium point. 3 days later, every government in the galaxy received the same transmission. Not a demand for surrender. Not a list of terms for negotiation. Not even a threat. Just a simple, almost casual invitation that somehow managed to be more unsettling than any declaration of war in galactic history. Ambassador Thorne appeared on screen again, but this time he wasn't sitting alone in some sterile diplomatic chamber. Behind him stretched what looked like the command deck of a space station, but not like any station in known galactic architecture. The walls curved in ways that suggested non-Euclidean geometry. The lighting had an almost organic quality, and through massive transparent barriers, I could see star fields that didn't match any known astronomical charts. But that wasn't the remarkable part. The remarkable part was the people. Humans, yes, but also beings I'd never seen before. Tall, graceful creatures with crystalline skin that reflected light in impossible patterns. Squat, heavily muscled beings whose hide seemed to absorb photons rather than reflect them. Ethereal forms that looked like they were made of condensed starlight and good intentions. Species that had been declared extinct by the Hegemony Council. Worlds that had been written off as pacified or integrated, or any of the other euphemisms the galactic powers used when they didn't want to say conquered and enslaved. They were all there, working together with the kind of easy cooperation that spoke of shared purpose rather than forced compliance. Citizens of the galaxy, Thorn began, his voice carrying that same quiet authority that had stopped an entire diplomatic assembly in its tracks. 3 weeks ago, we walked away from peace talks because we refused to accept subjugation disguised as negotiation. Today, we extend a different kind of invitation. The camera pulled back, revealing more of the impossible station. Corridors that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon, filled with beings from across the galaxy working on projects that looked like they belonged in science fiction rather than current reality. Gardens that grew in zero gravity, their plants reaching toward artificial suns that burned with the light of captured stars. Children of dozens of species playing together in spaces where the floor occasionally became the ceiling and nobody seemed to mind. This is Haven Station, Thorn continued, the first major installation of what we're calling the Free World Alliance. Membership is open to any species, any government, any individual willing to embrace 3 simple principles: self-determination, mutual respect, and the absolute right to tell anyone who threatens your freedom exactly where they can stick their demands. Captain Martinez stepped into frame, wearing the uniform of what appeared to be an entirely new military organization. The insignia was simple, a stylized representation of a spiral galaxy with the words Free World's Defense Force in multiple languages. But there was something about the way she wore it, the quiet confidence in her stance, that suggested this wasn't just another military organization. This was something new, something that hadn't existed in the galaxy before. We're not seeking to replace the Hegemony Council, Martinez announced with the kind of casual directness that probably gave diplomats throughout the galaxy stress headaches. We're offering an alternative, a place where small worlds don't get absorbed by large empires simply because they happen to have resources someone else wants. Where technology gets shared instead of hoarded, where beings can make their own choices about their own futures without having to ask permission from self-appointed galactic authorities. The transmission continued for another 20 minutes, outlining the structure and goals of this new alliance in detail that suggested months of careful planning. Trade agreements based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Defense pacts that actually defended rather than simply redistributed the spoils of conquest. Research partnerships that shared discoveries instead of weaponizing them. But the real message wasn't in what they said. It was in what they didn't need to say. Humanity hadn't just walked away from galactic civilization. They'd started building a better one, and they were inviting everyone else to join them. The transmission continued for another 10 minutes, outlining the structure and goals of this new alliance. But the real message was in what they didn't say. Humanity hadn't just walked away from galactic civilization. They'd started building a better one. Within a week, 17 minor species had formally applied for alliance membership. Within a month, that number had grown to 43. Entire star systems were declaring independence from the hegemony and requesting protection from the free world's fleet. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in centuries, it was changing from the bottom up instead of the top down. But the most remarkable thing wasn't the technology or the military victories or even the political revolution. That it was the realization that humanity had been planning this from the very beginning. Every diplomatic slight, every trade restriction, every attempt to limit human expansion, they'd all been carefully cataloged and analyzed. While the rest of the galaxy saw humans as a minor irritant to be managed, humanity had been building detailed profiles of every major government, mapping every trade route, identifying every weakness in the established order. They hadn't just walked away from the peace talks. They'd walked away from the entire system that created the need for those talks in the first place. 6 months later, I found myself serving as a liaison officer aboard Haven Station. The work was challenging, the hours were long, and the coffee was terrible. IT was also the most rewarding job I'd ever had. Because every day, I watched beings from across the galaxy discover something they'd forgotten they could have. Hope. The hope that they could determine their own futures. The hope that they didn't have to bow to the demands of more powerful species. The hope that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy could be a place where everyone got to make their own choices. And it all started because one human stood up and walked away. The Hegemony Council still exists, of course. They still hold their grand assemblies and make their proclamations. But their influence shrinks a little more each day, as world after world chooses freedom over security, self-determination over stability. Some say humanity doomed the galaxy to chaos and conflict. Others say they saved it from stagnation and oppression. Me? I think they just reminded us of something we'd forgotten. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away. And sometimes, just sometimes, the galaxy walks away with you.